I honestly never used to talk about just my immigration background or coming from an immigrant family or that part of my story. I wasn't talking about it before just because like people have their opinion. I was definitely scared of that, what people have to say. But as I got older, as I got more into my passion of what I'm trying to do, the more I realized that my story does matter. There's not a lot of women that are in the development space. And there's also not a lot of immigrant women that are in the development space. So I try to highlight what I do on a broader spectrum of just letting others know there's people like myself, challenges that my mom went through. I want to be able to give back so she can have an easy life. It would be wonderful if I can be able to call her up one day and say, you know what, hey, just grab your stuff and go home. You could be retired right now.
Welcome to Bridge to Self, where we spotlight the stories of second and 1.5 generation Black Americans. I'm your host, Ben Arthur. Super excited to be joined this week by PG Taylor. She is a Jamaican entrepreneur and real estate investor. She runs Taylor Real Estate Group, which focuses on land development, land acquisitions, and subdivisions across Middle Tennessee. We met spring or summer of last year. Downtown Nashville was like a Black professionals meetup event, and kind of kept in touch through Instagram, and super excited to have her on the platform today. So PG, how's everything going?
Everything's going good, and it's a pleasure for you to be able to have me on here as well. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to spread my story on your show.
Absolutely. Let's dive right into it then. So
Awesome.
um, obviously Jamaican, right? And so I guess what do people need to know about I guess your cultural upbringing to understand the woman who's on the show today?
Yeah, sure thing. Obviously, yes, like you said, I am Jamaican, so that definitely has a interesting background to it. And then also, I am an immigrant, so I came here back when I was 11 years old. My mom moved here. My dad, he was already living here in the United States, and he was driving tractor trailers. So my mom finally migrated, and my sister and myself came here, and we've been living in Nashville, Tennessee. And just from seeing what my mother or my parents together, I should say, but mostly my mother, just because she came into this country, obviously not knowing anything about how this economy works and stuff like that, compared to my dad, who's been living here driving tractor trailers. So that was a completely economic or culture shock, I should say, coming here. But being able to see her adversity and still being able to see that she kept her resilience and pushed through and made a living for us, my sister and myself. And I felt like that kind of carried on through me as well, just from pushing through all the roadblocks that I had coming along the way to eventually now currently doing real estate. So
You mentioned specifically, I guess, kind of with your mom, right? The maybe kind of rough transition for her. I guess being for you, like being 11 years old, like what was that process like for you getting acclimated to the U.S., right? Because you're old enough to where you know what's going
right.
on, but young enough to where um I guess you're still very
Right.
impressionable, right? So what was that transition like for you from Jamaica to Tennessee?
Well, I mean, like I said, it was complete shocked. And just to start out by saying, like, so my name is Peter Gay. And I go by PG for short. It's just a little bit easier for everyone to remember. But Peter Gay is a lot different. So just remembering back of when I came here and I started school, that alone was just kind of shocking to me, like, having people making fun of my name or
Mhm.
making fun of my accent, because I still have a very thick accent at that time. So that was kind of completely different for me, and a little bit hard for me kind of to understand, like, why are these kids making fun of my name? Why are they, making fun of how I talk? When back home, that's normal. I knew, my cousin dated a girl with the same name as me. So that's normal for me, to have
Yeah.
this name. And that was kind of completely different. And I had to, and because of that, I had to start pronouncing my words. And that's kind of why I sound like, the way that I do now, is just because I had to start talking proper English so people could kind of understand me, slowing down my conversations a lot more versus, talking to people that are Jamaican with, with the patois accent. So that alone kind of shifted everything for me to kind of get me into the realization, like, I'm, in a completely different environment. It's not the
Yeah.
same as being back home. people aren't as nice, I guess, at first. As that was kind of the first reaction that I got moving here, is just people aren't as nice as being back home. And one of the major things is, you know, even my friends and I talk about this to this day, is that back home, I obviously there's, racial or racism everywhere or whatever, but for us back home, we didn't really see that. We didn't really see black and white. It was just we were all Jamaicans who lived in this country,
Yeah.
so and then coming here, I saw how that segregation was. And I couldn't relate as much to my friends
Yeah.
who lived here because I didn't have that background. I didn't understand the well, why, like, the why behind, all this suppression or whatever, and so all of that played a part in kind of how things kind of worked its way through all my life.
So I want to dive into that a little bit more, right? Like kind of that learned, like living here, right? You have to learn kind of what it's like being black in America, right? Like the different things that come with, I don't know, navigating the police, or how you have to carry yourself, or just the different systemic issues, right? That black Americans have faced. And if even if you're an outsider, but you're like a black immigrant coming in, you have to kind of get to learn about that as well. So what was, I guess, how over was that just something over time that you just had to get used to? What was that process of actually like really starting to learn and internalize some of that? Because like for me, like being second gen, even though, so I was born and raised here, but my family being from Ghana, there was a lot of contextual things I didn't understand at home. But just being around black kids at schools, like over time I started to understand. So for you, what was that process like for you, knowing that like you look like your black American
Right.
peers, right? But there's a cultural disconnect. And so, but the fact that you did grow up here, like post 11 years old, what was that process like?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's an amazing question because that process, I would say, like, kind of like what you said, over time it does change. Over time you kind of learn and understand, but I believe that for me, what made a big difference is that, like I said, I talk about this stuff with my friends. So back then, when I was having these conversations, it was shedding a light to me to know that, I didn't understand their culture. I didn't understand,
Mhm.
that background. So I put that effort out there to go and kind of learn and understand and actually listen to my friends, listening to kind of what their understanding of it is, or their emotions or their feelings towards it, so I can kind of have a better grasp. So when I do talk to people now, I may not fully understand, but at the same time I do understand, just from being here post 11 years old. Over time I kind of gained that knowledge of just kind of how stuff are, and just fell in line with what it was. And I, to an extent, I get it, so
Yeah.
that was kind of just that journey, that I took over the times, just understanding, just talking to other people, doing the research. I don't One thing I do is I don't like talking about something if I don't know the facts, like, because
Yeah.
I can't really fully have that conversation with you because I don't know. So once I kind of have that understanding and the facts, and then I can say, okay, now I can kind of go back and forth. I can ask the questions that are important, the questions that need to be asked for myself, to kind of gain that better understanding as time goes by, and get that emotional back into that as well.
I'm curious, PG, how was maybe the way you've looked at yourself and your reality changed over time, like the way you look at your blackness changed over time, from like what that was like middle school age when you came to now, right, being a young adult? Like how was the way you've looked at your blackness changed over time? Like because like for me, like because I was in an environment where I grew up in Seattle. I grew up in like a suburb of Seattle that was predominantly like white and Asian, and so
Like,
in that area, like I wasn't around a whole lot of black people in general, let alone like Ghanaian people, and so I very much identified as just like Black American
right,
until like I got to college and got older, started to identify more with like my Ghanaian side and really embrace that more, and
right.
really start to understand it and whatnot. So I'm wondering, like, as you've gotten older to where you are now, how is that the way you've looked at your blackness shifted?
Uh, I definitely could say now I have that Black American spirit for sure. For sure. I mean, I'm fully embodying it. It's like, everything that uh I've grown up to be a part of over the years. I could feel like I definitely could identify as one of them as well, just
Yeah,
from who they are. But at the same time, I do still think I'm in that balance of things because, like I said, going back to the racism thing, like I love all people, and I understand there is things that isn't right, obviously, and may not be a part of my morals, but at the same time, it's just I'm a believer in God, so I kind of put that at the forefront and just understanding, like, I like all people. Like, I'm in the balance of things. So my friends always say, they're taking my black card because I may think, you know,
yeah,
a different way. And I only think that different ways just because of also I still have my culture that I grew up with. I still have those
yeah.
people that I hang out with and know. And, they embody all people as well. Like, and in Jamaica, a lot of the like supermarkets or grocery stores are definitely owned by Chinese men, but we still consider, even though they don't look like us, we still consider them, a part of us. So I just put that out there for, everyone essentially. It's just, I feel like I'm in the balance of things because I can get along with each group. And,
Yeah.
for myself, I went to WKU, which is essentially a predominantly white school, so I was around those type of people as well. And, I fit in. So I felt like I fit in with any group that I could kind of get along with and they share the same values as myself. It's not, so it's not necessarily saying, hey, I now classify as a Black American, but I can feel, all angles of, different backgrounds.
I think what you're describing is kind of like being a chameleon, so to speak, and I think that describes like a lot of whether you moved here when you were a child or born here to like African or Caribbean parents, like you know how to navigate different groups of people, right? You may not be 100% yourself in any one environment, but you can relate to so many people and you have that cultural upbringing back home. And I and the point you brought up earlier about some people maybe taking away your black card, it's like what does that even mean? It's like whenever people say that, it's like it's always in the black American lens, right? There's no
Right.
there's no it's like what yeah, it's always funny to me when people kind of describe it like that, like, oh, you're not really like when we know like a lot of the common black movies like in
Right.
America, like
Right.
a lot of them like I didn't grow up with, right? Because
Likewise.
because my parents didn't have any contextual understanding of it, and then just the environment I was in, it wasn't like I had like a lot of black friends at school, and so when people would say, "Oh, you haven't seen that," like, and you're black, like it's like my family's from Ghana, like
Right.
it's different. So I don't know. That's
Just
my little yeah.
Well, like, to touch on that, like, man, like, it was probably maybe freshman year in high school that I kind of started really hearing about these black movies. And I kid you not, I went home and I binge watched like so many different black movies because I just couldn't relate. I couldn't be a part of those conversations, even though I wanted to, so I relate to that 100%. So I understand.
Absolutely. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. So
Cool.
you're in real estate, right? And so I know you've talked about. Well, I saw on your Instagram you said you got into real estate because you were broke and you didn't have any money. So what? So what exactly is the story behind? I I guess the driver to getting into it and like kind of how that came about.
Yeah, sure thing. So going back to college at the time when I was getting ready to go to college, my mom was going through the immigration process. So I didn't get, financial aid. I didn't get any, free money, I guess you could say that. So I had to apply to scholarships and get what I can get that apply to me. And so I did get some scholarships, and that's how I was able to go to WKU. But throughout the years of being there, I also had to pay out of pocket for the remainder of my tuition. So every year
Mm,
that I was there, I had a full-time job and shout out to Krispy Kreme. That was my full-time job, first job I ever got. And I kept it all the way until the day I dropped out. So I ended up dropping out of school because I just couldn't pay for it anymore. Like the portion that I had to pay for myself, I was paying for school, and then I was also paying for housing because, like I said, it was not at home. I was in Kentucky, an hour away, and after that, I ended up getting a job at Hertz Rental Car, and I had essentially the rental car counters are close to each other. I worked at the airport, and there's a guy that was working at Enterprise, and he was into trading stocks and currencies and all that, and it kind of intrigued me. I always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but just never knew what exactly I was going to be doing with that. I went to school to be a criminal attorney, so completely different than real estate, a whole other spectrum. So there's this guy, like I said, at Enterprise. He was trading stocks and stuff, and kind of inquired about it. He was telling me a little bit about it, and I got intrigued. And then so I started trading stocks a little bit. Definitely a lot of failures, but also some ups with that as well. So after that, I moved back home because I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna come back home. I'll save some money, and then I'll figure out what my next steps are. So moved back home to Nashville, and I was driving to work, and I was taking my mom to work every morning, and there was this radio commercial with this guy named Dan Merrill, and he would come on every morning, and he's like advertising this seminar for real estate. And I just decided, well, hey, I mean, I don't have anything to lose, right? So let's just go ahead and check out the seminar and see what it's about. And funny enough, the seminar was actually at my mom's job, which was crazy. So at
Oh,
the
wow.
building that she worked at, the seminar was going to also be in that same building. So I was like, what are the odds?
Yeah, talk about the
So
universe working for you.
right.
Yeah.
So I went to the seminar. It was free. My mind was immediately blown. They were talking about wholesale and real estate. My first time hearing about that. So they had, obviously, a lot of these seminars, they're trying to upscale you to, maybe their 3-day class, and then maybe their course, however it is. So obviously that's just the MO. So I did the 3-day class. I got suckered in just like everybody else. And they had an opportunity where if you brought a friend, you were able to split the price. So like I said, at the time, I didn't have a whole bunch of money. I moved back at home, and I was living at home with my mom, still working at Hertz, but wasn't making too much. And I was helping my mom also with the bills. So I essentially took a friend, we split the cost, and I took 3 friends and we split the cost, and I went to their 3-day class. So that was kind of the first step. Immediately after the last class, I immediately took action, like went home and started hitting the phones. Like they made it seem just as simple as that. Like start calling, and
Mhm.
maybe a deal is going to land in your lap. So essentially I started calling immediately. The first person I called, he actually became my mentor.
Oh, wow.
So there go the universe again. So essentially called him, did the whole script, did a whole spill. And at the end of the call, he kind of asked me, hey, are you new? And I was just like, I paused for a second. I was just like, hey, thinking like, man, should I lie? uh, because that's what they taught you at the seminar is, you don't have to tell people, if you've been doing it forever, if you just started today, like, so I thought about it like, hey, should I lie, or should I just be honest and tell the truth? So I ended up choosing to be honest and tell the truth. So I told this man, hey, you know what? I am new. It's my first call. How did you know? And he was like, well, you sounded shaky on the phone. So I could tell. And he was like, well, if you're very serious about this and you're trying to get into real estate, this is what I do, and I'm flipping houses, and we should meet up if you're interested. And I was just like, well, I don't know about meeting a random guy off of Craigslist. So I ended up telling him, I was like, hey, well, if you are also serious, tell you what, I work at Hertz Rental Car at the airport. You come to the airport, in front of everyone, if in case anything happens, come to my counter, introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there. So I know that you're a real person.
Mm.
And he did exactly that. He flew in from Colorado. So he was living in
Oh,
Colorado at the
wow. He
time. I
flew
know.
in. Oh my God.
So he was living in Colorado because he was in the military. So he was a commander out there. And
Oh,
so he
wow.
flew in, and he came, did exactly what he said he was going to do, introduced himself. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, okay, this guy is real, And then he handed me a book, and it was called Go Givers. So that was my first book, I guess you say, that gave me the push to, know that I'm going to go out here and I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. Especially with giving back to people, where essentially the point of the book is the more you give to others, without thinking about something in return, the universe will bless you. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole MO of that.
Mhm.
So he gave me the book. We chopped it up a little bit, and then he offered to let me come out and meet up with him and his business partner. So I did that. So fast forward, he became my mentor. I followed them around for a while in Nashville, watching them flip houses after houses, and then they started their first new construction. I didn't do any deals yet, so I was still in the learning phase. So at the time, I was doing it with a friend. So my friend ended up getting pregnant. And because she got pregnant, I felt like, well, I don't want to do this by myself. I felt like it was just so much information that I just felt like I couldn't handle it. So I just stopped doing it. And I told them, maybe I'm not ready. I'm not in that position yet. I don't have the focus or the help. So I stopped doing it. And after I stopped doing it, I went back to my regular day, just working, but I still had that real estate spirit. It was just like that bug that would never get away. And
Mhm.
so during that time, even though I wasn't actively doing it every single day, I still was doing it a little by little. And crazy, I know a lot of people might say, might think this is crazy, but I promise you, there's a silver lining. But I used to smoke a lot of weed, and I would leave work and so sorry mama if you're hearing this. But I used to smoke weed and I knew I couldn't smoke at home. So I would go get the weed and I'll smoke on the way home. And so this one day, the guy that I was buying weed from, I went to high school with him. So I would go to his house every single day. Well, not every day, but whenever I was getting some weed, and I would go and I would pass this house on his street that was just vacant or the grass overgrown. And I was just like, one day I stopped there right after leaving his house and I sat there and I was just like, And I just kept looking at the house, and then I just got out the car and I said, okay, well, let me go check it out. Went and checked out the house, and I went on this website called truepeoplesearch.com. It's free. And I looked up this person's phone number. So I looked up their address, tried to find their phone number and the owner of the property. I called them and I asked them if they wanted to sell their house. And that was kind of hit the ground running after that. They said yes. I was shocked, gave them an offer. They took it. I had to bring a realtor to the table. So I didn't have a realtor,
Mhm.
but they had a realtor on their end and they wanted a realtor, even though I didn't have one on my end. So I was working, I switched from Hertz and I went to work for American Airlines. And at American Airlines, I met this woman. Her name's Dion, and she was a realtor. So I worked nights for her. I used to pick up her shifts all the time to make extra cash. And I knew Dion was a realtor. So I hit up Dion. I was like, yo, Dion, I got this deal. And all you have to do is just sign the paperwork saying that you're the realtor on the deal and you're going to make some money. You make your 3%. And she did exactly that. And we did the deal. I made $5,000 because I ended up selling that deal to a buddy of mine. And, that I met through American Airlines as well, and sold it to him. He built the house, and I made $5,000 within like a couple of days. Dion made her 3%, and that was kind of my start to real estate. So that
Wow.
$5,000, it felt very real to me. I mean, I know it's not a lot of money, but to me at the time, it was a lot of money in one sitting to get a $5,000 check. That was the first time I'm seeing a $5,000 check, a holding $5,000 check. So the excitement that I had, it was just like, this is real. This is exactly what I'm trying to do.
Beyond the money part of it, right? And obviously that's a key part of all this. But you said that when you went back to the Hertz job, like you couldn't get the real estate bug like out of your head. What was it about real estate, the idea of it that you couldn't shake?
It was just like, so this kind of goes into, I plan to start a nonprofit a little bit later on in my career that I'm trying to put together right now. But this kind of leads into why I'm doing the nonprofit. But I feel like when I came out of high school, um, I didn't know what I wanted to do immediately. Well, let me not say not know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be an attorney because there was a lot of attorneys in my family, but I didn't know how I was going to achieve that, being in the position that I was and the cost of school and everything. And then I felt like when I found real estate, it was just like, well, this is something that you don't have to have a degree for. You don't have to be the smartest person in the bunch. I felt like this is a perfectly made avenue and vehicle to help me get to where I'm trying to be, which is obviously financial freedom for
Hmm.
myself, my family, and whoever else. But I felt like it was just, a vehicle that I didn't need to have so much backing to be able to do. So that alone to me made it, real enough to believe that like I can do this, and I've seen there's a guy that I went to a mastermind back in February, and there's a guy that he's making multi-million dollars, and this guy, he had several DUIs, he's been in and out of jail, he was on drugs, and he was able to change his entire life and make millions and millions of dollars. So it continues to show me that no matter your background, no matter where you've been in your life, this is still an option. Like, there's no one that is judging you, there's no one
Yeah.
that is telling you that you can't do it or you need something to be able to do this. You don't. So that's kind of why I liked real estate and why I stuck with it.
So it sounds like there was no barrier to entry, right? Like,
Correct.
yeah, got it, got it. Okay.
So yeah, people say, I mean, people say you need a lot of money, which isn't necessarily true. It can always be the people that as well, and the relationships that you've built and nourished along the time. So you can do a deal with $1 in your account. I always tell people, it may be very hard, but it is a possibility that you can do it. As long as you know the right people and get in the right spaces.
PG, when I was doing kind of my research on you just ahead of this conversation, looking at your LinkedIn and your Instagram, of course, and your website for the Taylor Real Estate Group, it seemed like everything led back to kind of what you're saying, right? The desire to achieve financial freedom, but it didn't really seem to achieve it for yourself. Like it was for your family. It seems that your family is very much your North Star. Why is that?
Yeah, so like I said, like, just growing up coming here and that whole transition, being able to see, the challenges that my mom went through. I want to be able to give back so she can have an easy life. She's 51 now. Sorry to tell her age, but she's 51 now, and she's been working all her life. It would be wonderful if I can be able to call her up one day and say, you know what, hey, just grab your stuff and go home. You could be retired right now. So that that alone, and then also my grandparents, I mean, I pray every day that they live to see me become extremely successful and have a family and everything of my own. But they're very, very old. My grandfather, he is 93 years old. My grandmother, she's about to be 90 years old.
Mm.
And my grandmother, she has dementia, and my aunt, she takes care of her. All their children take care of her, but they actually live with one of my aunts, and she has it hard as well. She has to work and everything, but then also taking care of two old people full time. I wish that I can be in a position to be able to ease that up off of her, like being able to the smallest stuff, like I'm not rich right now, but hopefully one day, but uh stuff like diapers for my grandmother, because like I said, she has dementia, and those small things, even though they're small, they can definitely be a tremendous and a huge factor in somebody else's life. For example, my aunt, to be able to take that expense off of her, like she doesn't have to pay for that stuff anymore, or a doctor's bill or stuff like that. And that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not just for myself, it's for them. It's to being able to relieve them of all their stress, their pains, their worries, all the things that they've been having to endure throughout their lives, and still carry on and still have a smile on their face and still trust in God. And, yes, we are human, so we complain here and there, but they're still going to move forward. And I want to be able to be a burden for them. So that's kind of why I stuck to it and continue to do what I'm doing every day.
In the pursuit of financial freedom, what have you learned about yourself, or what have you been shocked to find out about yourself in that pursuit that I guess that you've clung to, or something like that? Like what is it about that process that you've learned?
Uh, One thing I've learned about myself, I'm an emotional person at times. And when I say emotional, not like crying all the time or stuff like that, but as far as like, there's a lot of passion behind everything that I do, the ideas that I think about. There's so much passion, and there's a purpose on why I'm doing that. Kind of going back to telling you that I want to do a nonprofit. Like, my nonprofit came from an idea of, what happened to me, but also, thinking about other people, like other immigrants who are coming out of high school that may not have the resources or the ability to attend college, wanted to, inform them and let them know, like, there are other opportunities out here. Your life doesn't stop there just because you couldn't do this or do that, so I felt like I've learned that a lot of stuff that I do and I try to pursue all comes from, like, passion and just being that emotional person behind it. So
I'm wondering, PG, if you've thought about if you're being an immigrant child, right? Like when you came here, you were a child, right? So I'm wondering if you feel like that immigrant status has played a role in that drive, right, to serve family almost, right? Because even for me, like being second gen, like even though the pressures I faced weren't always explicitly said, but it was in understanding the sacrifices my parents made to come here from Ghana and to um, take advantage of the resources and the opportunity and the access to things that they couldn't conceive of in Ghana. And so I think I've always internally put pressure on myself to like be that great son who can provide for them, even if they haven't
right,
necessarily said it, right?
right,
And so I'm wondering if for you that you've kind of thought through that, like maybe that your mom, your family hasn't necessarily said you have to do this, but you feel like in your heart
right.
like that's what you have to do.
100%, like literally hit the nail on the head. I feel the same way. They have never told me that. They've never told me that they need me to do X, Y, and Z, or they're dependent on me, but my heart and, who I am is why I want to do it. Not because they asked me. And like I said, they never have. It's just, I want to do that. And then just to kind of touch on the first part of what you were saying, I honestly never used to talk about just my immigration background or, coming from an immigrant family or, that part of my story until kind of now. Now I've recently started opening up. So this is actually something new for me. And just because I wasn't talking about it before, just because, like people have their opinion and I was definitely scared of that, like, what people have to say. But as I got older, as I got more into my passion of what I'm trying to do, the more I realized that my story does matter.
Mm. What do you hope people get from your story?
I hope people get from my story that anyone can do it. Honestly, like I'm a walking testimony every single day, and God continues to provide and push forward, even on the down days. Just understanding that you know you can do it as well. It's hard, but it's possible, and that's why. Sorry, go
Oh
ahead.
no, go ahead. No,
No, no,
finish your
no. So
thought.
I was just gonna say, that's kind of why my slogan for my company is, strive to achieve and never give up. And full circle life moment, where I got that from is the school that I grew up in Jamaica. It was a Kingsgate Prep. They've closed down now. Shout out to them. But uh, that school slogan was strive to achieve and never give up. And to this day, I'm 29 years old, about to be 30 years old, and I still live by that every single day.
Mm. Well, speaking of that slogan, and I guess what you do now specifically in real estate, if you're in front of someone and you're giving a 30-second elevator pitch of what exactly you do in real estate now, just with the Taylor Real Estate Group, what is that message and the reason why you've kind of zeroed in on that aspect of real estate?
So that's actually funny. Like, so my elevator pitch is, I guess, completely different than my slogan. Only because what I've taught from learned from my business coaches, you want to be short and sweet and explain what you're doing in your elevation pitch. So in my personal elevation pitch, I just literally tell them, like, I build subdivisions so the average American person can basically own a home in well, not Tennessee, but in the world. So essentially that's my elevator pitch, is let them know, like, I build subdivision so the average American can own a home. Short and sweet, but essentially, I guess to broaden that out is, and how it could connect to, or how it does connect to my slogan and my purpose and all that, is essentially, for myself, there's not a lot of women that are in the development space. and there's also not a lot of immigrant women that are in the development space. So I'm one of few. So I try to highlight what I do on a broader spectrum of just letting others know, like, there's people like myself. There's not many of us, but there's people like myself that are out here doing that.
Mm, okay. Okay. And I guess kind of winding down here, PG, I guess where can people go online on social media to learn more about you, what you're all about in Taylor Real Estate Group as well?
Yes, sir. I'm on Instagram at I am PG Taylor. Also, my website is www.pgtaylorrei.com. I'm also on Facebook, PG Taylor. Anywhere you type my name in, it should pop up. LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. If you want to connect on LinkedIn or start a conversation, my name on there is Peter Gay Taylor, but you can also find me by PG Taylor.
Awesome. And all that information for those of you listening will be in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And then a last one for you, PG. I asked this to all my guests at the end. It's a bit broad, but um, it's so. What do you believe is one thing that people can do to get a step closer to like unlocking the highest version of who they are?
Uh, that's a really good question. Uh, Honestly, I think if you dig deep and you pray about it. Like, I pray so much about this journey. Like, a lot of people don't talk about their journey, the ups and downs, the battle, the preparation, the mindset that goes all into it. And I've prayed so much, even on days that I'm like crying and wondering if this is what I should be doing. If you pray about it and you just dig deep, I am 100% sure that God is going to guide your steps. And if you truly do want to do it, it's going to happen.
I love it. PG, thank you so much for your time and for all you listening, whether it be via YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify. I appreciate you guys for tapping in, for listening. Uh, all the support means a ton. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, at Bridge to Self. It's the number 2 in between Bridge and Self. It's at Bridge to Self on Instagram as well as YouTube. And then be sure to rate and engage so I know how I'm doing so I can continue to create the best possible podcast for you all. But you guys know the deal, every other Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central Time. But until next time, I'll see you guys soon. All right. Peace out.
Peace.